We're joined now by Ali Vaez, Director of the Iran Project and Senior Advisor to the President at the International Crisis Group. Ali, thank you very much for joining us on the show here in Singapore this morning. I want to start by asking you, what you said in a direct quote to the Wall Street Journal. You said Iran will respond. So I'm curious to know why. First of all, how will it do so? And what would Tehran be considering as it weighs its options right now?
Look, not responding to what the Iranians perceive as an act of aggression on their territory basically would signal to the United States that these kind of attacks are fair game. And the U.S. can, at will, and Israel, at any point, come into the Iranian territory and bomb whatever target they have in mind. So the Iranians will have to impose some kind of cost on the United States for its intervention, as they have retaliated now in the past 10 days against Israel. The question really is a question of sequencing of whether Iran would first try to reach a balance of devastation with Israel and then retaliate against the United States, or will try to do so as it is fighting Israel at the same time.
Ali, for 2 decades, American presidents avoided an all-out attack on Iran, and the Ayatollah basically did the same. And Trump was actually walking the same path initially, but changed his mind. What happened?
Well, we don't have the full picture yet, but it does appear that after about 5 rounds of negotiations between Iran and the United States, in which President Trump changed his mind and changed the goalposts multiple times, he was disappointed that a quick diplomatic victory was not within reach, and therefore was not as opposed to Prime Minister Netanyahu pursuing a military solution to the nuclear crisis with Iran. And he was reportedly very impressed with the initial achievements of Israel, decapitating the Iranian military and setting back Iran's nuclear program, and wanted to join in and deliver the coup de grace to Iran's nuclear program and be known as the president who finished off Iran's nuclear program. But of course, as we know already, that objective was not achieved in this initial attack.
And Ali, you warned that it could be a matter of time before Iran's nuclear program is reconstituted and that it would sprint for a weapon. But given the intense surveillance and potential for further strikes, is that possible? And would such a sprint be rational or, I don't know, suicidal for Tehran's perspective?
Well, look, the reality is that even now, the 2 ingredients that Iran needs for a dash to nuclear weapons, which is a stockpile of highly enriched uranium, that Vice President J.D. Vance said today, it is intact and it's still in Iranian hands because they had moved it from Fordo and other bunkered facilities, and a stockpile of advanced centrifuges. These are things that Iran still has. And because UN nuclear inspectors are no longer able to access these sites, which are now war zones, we are not sure where the material and the machinery are. And in a vast country like Iran, without supervision by the UN inspectors, it is possible for Iran to try to dash towards nuclear weapons. And at the end of the day, they have acquired the knowledge. So the only sustainable way of preventing them from weaponizing that knowledge is through a diplomatic deal. And that requires a win-win solution, which of course does not come at the tip of bunker buster bombs.
So, so this whole idea of once and done seems like wishful thinking. I mean, what are the chances of a diplomatic solution right now as you see it?
I don't see the odds of a deal very high right now because the Iranians have concluded that President Trump is not a reliable negotiating partner. He withdrew from the previous nuclear deal that the Iranians were complying with in 2018. Again, in this round of negotiations, the Iranians believe that he was basically, this was all a ruse in order to allow Israel to prepare to take military action. He's threatening them with regime change. It is very hard to imagine that the Iranians would come back to the negotiating table anytime soon.
And Ali, Iran's foreign minister, we believe, has arrived in Moscow to meet his close ally, Mr. Putin. Can Tehran expect Russians backing at the stage, or will Moscow sort of tread carefully, trying not to get involved?
I think it's the latter. Russia often overpromises and underdelivers to the Iranians. The Iranians don't have really a lot of friends or the kind of strategic allies that they can count on. They went to Russia's rescue in the initial phases of the war in Ukraine when Russia needed drones, and the Iranians provided the technology for the Russians. But Russians had promised to reciprocate by delivering air defense systems and fighter jets to the Iranians, which would have been very useful for them at a moment like this, but they never delivered that. And I doubt that Russia would do much for Iran at this moment. It is actually benefiting from increase in oil prices, and it is also benefiting from the fact that the U.S. is not as much focused on Ukraine and is once again bogged down in the Middle East.
Ali, Mr. Arakchi and other top Iranian officials say, Tehran will only talk if Israel stops attacking, which doesn't seem likely unless Trump actually asked Netanyahu to stop. I mean, is that going to happen at all?
So I think the Iranian concept here is that if they externalize the costs of this conflict by putting pressure on global energy markets, by disrupting the free flow of energy out of the Strait of Hormuz, not necessarily by blocking it, but by targeting shipping lanes and tankers, etc., that would create the kind of political backlash within President Trump's camp that would force him to blink first and pull the plug on Prime Minister Netanyahu's ability to escalate this conflict. But again, as you see on both sides, unfortunately, is a very perilous game of chicken that could really result in a disastrous regional conflagration, which I think would not have any winners.
And Ali, your thoughts on regime change? I mean, it was once unthinkable, but I believe we actually said the same thing about Bashar al-Assad in Syria.
That is true. The Iranian regime is also very unpopular. But unlike in the case of Syria, it does not have an organized, disciplined, viable alternative that is ready to march into the capital and take over power. So in a scenario of regime implosion, I think the likeliest outcome is either that the Revolutionary Guards would take over, and I'm not sure that would be any better for Israel or the United States, or that Iran would become Libya in 2011, basically a divided country that would descend into civil strife and destabilization of a country of 90 million. Again, not a good thing for anyone, including Israel.
And Ali, surely Pyongyang is watching. Do you worry that these latest events will harden their belief that only nuclear weapons, not negotiation, are the only reliable deterrent?
It is absolutely proven that point. President Trump, of course, treated Kim Jong-un with respect and has not put any pressure on North Korea since the exchange of love letters. But he withdrew from a nuclear deal that had constrained Iran's nuclear program and subjected it to very rigorous monitoring, imposed sanctions on them, and now has joined Israeli aggression against them. So it is actually not just a lesson for North Korea, but for other countries that the ultimate deterrent in the form of nuclear weapons is the only thing that you can count on for your security.
And Ali, we are waiting for those battle damage assessments to come in to show how much damage was actually done to those 3 nuclear sites. I want to ask you, if the reports actually show that the damage was considerable, significant, and the sites are now inoperable, is that going to stop the Trump administration, from continuing with its attacks? Is a job done? Or is it still going to take it further and ensure that, the entire program is dismantled, notwithstanding, the fact that you mentioned that the knowledge is still there?
It's a good question, because I do not believe that a very accurate battle damage assessment is actually possible, because there are no boots on the ground. There are no inspectors who can have access to these underground facilities. Indeed, if a bunker facility under a mountain like Fordo has been damaged or destroyed, it would take weeks for inspectors to be able to dig out the rubbles, even if they could get access, and then to figure out what exactly has happened. So an accurate assessment is just not on the cards. But the Trump administration could think, especially if there is no imminent Iranian retaliation, that because it can get away with conducting these kind of strikes, it is possible that it would do a second round or a third round. But this is precisely the kind of mission creep that the United States has experienced in that part of the world quite often. It goes in thinking that it can conduct a clean and contained operation, but it actually turns into a long nightmare, a quagmire that is not easy to get out of.
Okay, Ali, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you very much for your time and insight this morning. Ali Vaez, the Director of Iran Project and Senior Advisor to the President at the International Crisis Group.